That's what happens when you marry down, my brother Wade said, his voice loud enough for the whole terrace to hear. He gestured with his champagne flute at my 8-year-old son Leo, whose only crime was wearing a perfectly warm, perfectly good coat from a thrift store. Some of us, he continued, looking pointedly at his fiancée's parents, believe in giving our family the best. Forks froze midair. The string quartet seemed to falter for a beat. The table laughed. Not a big, booming laugh, but a series of short, sharp, uncomfortable barks of amusement. Wade's fiancée, Ashley, gave a tight little smile and looked away, her cheeks flushing. Her wealthy parents, the Hamiltons, offered me a look that was a cocktail of pity and condescension. My own mother giggled, a high-pitched sound that always accompanied my humiliation, and my father studied the intricate pattern on his dinner plate as if it held the secrets to the universe. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I simply looked around the table at the circle of smiling, complicit faces. I met Wade's triumphant gaze, saw the smug curl of his lip, and I smiled back. It was a small, quiet smile, one that didn't reach my eyes. He thought he had won. He thought he had successfully painted me as the poor, struggling single mother to elevate his own status. He mocked my son's second-hand coat at his own lavish engagement party, a party thrown at a country club I knew for a fact he couldn't afford. He did this, forgetting, or perhaps simply not caring, that for the last 3 years, I had been the one quietly paying his fiancée's staggering student loans. My name is Helen Porter, and for most of my 35 years, I have been the invisible wallet of my family. They didn't know I was prepared. They didn't know I kept receipts for everything. They thought I would take it, swallow it down with the overpriced Chardonnay, because I always had. They were wrong. If you've ever been treated like the black sheep simply because you don't perform for applause, you know what that moment feels like. If you've ever had to choose between the family you were born into and your own sanity, then you understand the crossroads I was standing at. Hit that like button if you agree that respect, even from family, is earned, not owed. The pattern started long before Ashley and her $67,000 nursing degree ever entered the picture. It began in childhood. Wade was the golden child, the charming, athletic boy who could do no wrong. I was the quiet, studious girl, the fixer. When Wade broke a neighbor's window with a baseball, I was the one who used my babysitting money to help pay for it, just to stop my mother's anxious fretting. When he failed algebra, I was the one who spent weeks tutoring him, only for him to brag to his friends that he'd aced it easy. My successes were quiet, expected. His failures were loud, dramatic events that required all hands on deck, with my hands being the most capable. This dynamic solidified in adulthood. I went to a state school, worked 2 jobs, and graduated with honors and 0 debt. I got a job in logistics, a field no one in my family understood, but it was stable and it paid well. I climbed the ladder methodically, quietly. I bought a modest condo, drove a reliable used car, and built a comfortable life for myself and, eventually, for my son, Leo. Wade, 5 years younger, took a different path. Our parents paid for him to attend a private university with a renowned business program. He dropped out after 3 semesters to find himself. This journey of self-discovery involved a 6-month backpacking trip through Southeast Asia, funded by a mysterious inheritance from a great aunt that I later discovered was just a second mortgage my parents took out on their house. The house I knew they were already struggling to afford. When he returned, he declared he would be a personal trainer, not just any trainer, but a lifestyle architect for the wealthy. This required an image. It required a leased BMW 3 Series, a downtown apartment with a view, and a wardrobe of designer athletic wear. The lease payments were $800 a month. The rent was $2,200. His starting salary at a high-end gym was $35,000 a year. The math didn't work. It never worked. And so, the calls began. "Hey, Helen," he'd start, his voice oozing with a practice charm. "So listen, I'm in a bit of a jam. A client's check bounced and my rent is due. Could you spot me for a few days?" A few days became a month. A month became a permanent subsidy. I was the silent investor in the failing enterprise that was my brother's life. At first, it was a few $100s here and there. Then my mother got involved. "Helen, darling," she'd say in a hushed, conspiratorial tone, "Wade is just getting on his feet. He has so much potential. We have to support him. Family backs family. Always has." The phrase was a weapon, and she wielded it with surgical precision. It was the excuse for everything. It was why I paid his $4,000 credit card bill racked up on business dinners that I knew were just expensive dates. It was why I co-signed a loan for his advanced kinesiology certification, only to find out he spent the money on a weekend trip to Miami with friends. When I confronted him, he laughed. "You gotta live a little, sis. Besides, you're good for it." My mother's response? "Oh, Helen, don't be so dramatic. He's a young man enjoying his life. You were always so serious." Every time he failed, the family narrative twisted to make it my responsibility. Every time I succeeded, my success was minimized or ignored. When I was promoted to senior logistics manager, a role that came with a significant pay increase, I told my parents over dinner. My father grunted his approval. My mother smiled vaguely and said, "That's nice, dear. Did Wade tell you he got a new client? A very important man. A CAO?" He hadn't. The client was a fiction, a story to keep the illusion alive, but the illusion was more important than my reality. I was the invisible engine humming away in the background, while Wade was the flashy, chrome-detailed car sputtering on the fumes of my hard work. I kept paying. I kept fixing. I did it because I was conditioned to. I did it because a small, foolish part of me hoped that one day they would see me, that one day the support would flow both ways. And I did it for Leo. I wanted my son to have a family, grandparents, an uncle, cousins. I was willing to swallow a lot of poison to give him that. Then came Ashley. She was beautiful, ambitious, and seemed to genuinely adore Wade. She was a nursing student with a mountain of debt, but she had a plan. For the first time, it seemed like Wade had a stabilizing force in his life. I was hopeful. My mother was ecstatic. "She's from a good family, Helen," my mother told me over the phone. "The Hamiltons. They have a place at the lake. This is a huge opportunity for Wade." The subtext was clear. This was Wade's chance to marry up, to finally achieve the wealthy lifestyle he felt he was entitled to. There was just one problem. Ashley's parents were shrewd. They liked Wade's charm, but they were wary of his financial instability. The topic of Ashley's student loans came up. She had over $80,000 in federal and private loans. It was a weight on her, a barrier to their future. That's when my mother made her move. "Helen," she said, her voice dropping into that familiar, manipulative purr. "Wade and Ashley are so serious, but this debt, it's a cloud over them. Mr. Hamilton mentioned it. It makes Wade look, well, it makes him look like he can't provide." "He can't, Mom," I said, my voice flat. "He can barely provide for himself." "Don't be cynical. He's on the cusp of something great. He just needs a little help, a push. Think of it as an investment in his happiness, in the family's future. If you could just help with the loans for a little while, just until they're married and on their feet." "She's going to be family, Helen. Family helps family." I resisted. For a week I said no, but the pressure was immense. Wade called, alternating between begging and accusing me of being jealous. My father, in a rare moment of verbal participation, called and mumbled, "Your mother is very upset, Helen. Just think about it." The final blow was a call from my mother, crying, fake, theatrical sobs that I knew so well. "I just want to see my son happy," she wailed. "Is that so much to ask? You have a good job. It's not that much for you. For us, for Wade, it's everything." So I caved. I agreed to take over the payments on Ashley's largest private loan, a sum of $67,000. The monthly payment was $1,150. I set up an automatic payment through the provider, Navient. I became an authorized payer. The money just vanished from my account each month. I never spoke of it again. Wade and my mother certainly never mentioned it. It was another one of my invisible contributions. The Hamiltons were suddenly appeased. Wade's financial footing seemed, from the outside, much stronger. 6 months later, he proposed. Ashley said yes. For 3 years, I made that payment. 36 payments. $41,400. I paid it on time, every single month. During that time, I paid for Leo's basketball lessons, which were $280 a month. I paid for his dental checkups. I paid for his school supplies. I also paid to fix Wade's BMW when he backed into a pole, $1,200. Paid his overdue car insurance, $600. and gave him $5,000 for an engagement ring because Ashley had her heart set on a specific cut. Every time I wrote a check or authorized a transfer, a small piece of my self-respect chipped away. I was funding a lie. I was enabling a man-child and placating a narcissistic mother, all under the guise of family. The resentment was a low, constant hum beneath the surface of my life. I kept telling myself it was for Leo, for his sense of belonging. The engagement party was the culmination of this grand illusion. It was held at the Oak Ridge Country Club, a place of manicured lawns and hushed old money. The Hamiltons had paid for half, and Wade had proudly announced he was covering the rest. I knew that meant my parents had drained their savings account to prop him up, and I suspected I would be getting a call for a loan in the next week to cover the shortfall. Leo was excited. He loved his Uncle Wade, who was always fun and flashy, tossing him in the air and promising him the world. He didn't see the rot beneath the surface. I had bought him a new shirt and pants for the party, but it was a chilly October evening, so he wore his winter coat. It was a dark blue puffer coat from Patagonia, a brand I could never afford new. I had found it at a high-end children's consignment shop in the next town over. It was in perfect condition, clean and warm. Leo loved it because it had a dozen pockets. We walked onto the terrace, where the party was in full swing. A string quartet was playing softly. Waiters circulated with trays of champagne and canapés. Wade, looking handsome and suffocatingly smug in a tailored suit, was holding court with Mr. and Dr. Hamilton. Ashley stood beside him, radiant in a white dress, clutching his arm. "Helen! Leo! You made it!" Wade boomed, turning to us. His eyes scanned me quickly, dismissively, then landed on Leo. He paused. A slow, cruel smile spread across his face. He looked at Mr. Hamilton. "Richard, you know my sister Helen, the sensible one," he said, the word sensible dripping with disdain, "and this is my nephew Leo." Mr. Hamilton gave a polite, tight smile. "A pleasure." Wade then crouched down to Leo's level, but he wasn't looking at my son. He was looking at his coat. He flicked the fabric with his finger. "Whoa, buddy. What's this? Did you get that from the lost and found?" Leo's face fell. He looked down at his coat, suddenly ashamed. "No. Mommy got it for me." Wade stood up, shaking his head with mock sadness. He threw an arm around Ashley, pulling her close, and that's when he delivered the line, loud enough for the nearby tables, for my parents, for everyone to hear. That's what happens when you marry down. Some of us believe in giving our family the best. The world went quiet for a second. I could hear the blood pounding in my ears. I saw Leo's eyes well up with tears. He wrapped his arms around my legs, hiding his face in my skirt. I saw my mother's giggle, her hand flying to her mouth to cover her amusement. I saw my father's immediate, practiced fascination with his shoes. I saw Ashley's flicker of embarrassment, quickly masked by a complicit smile for her future in-laws. She chose him. In that split second, she chose the lie. And something inside me snapped. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was a clean, quiet break. A shift in the tectonic plates of my soul. The years of resentment, of being used, of being invisible, all coalesced into a single point of cold, hard clarity. The hum of resentment stopped. In its place, there was only silence. A profound, empowering silence. I wasn't the invisible wallet anymore. I was the architect of my own life, and demolition was the first step. I bent down and wrapped my arms around my son. "You know what, buddy?" I whispered into his hair, my voice perfectly steady. "I think your coat is the best coat here, because it's warm and it has a dozen pockets for all your treasures. And you know what else? I think we've had enough of this party. Let's go get ice cream." Leo looked up, his little face streaked with silent tears. He nodded. I stood up. I didn't look at Wade. I didn't look at my parents or the Hamiltons. I looked past them, toward the exit. "We're leaving," I said. My voice was calm. There was nothing to add. "Helen, don't be so dramatic," my mother started, the giggle gone, replaced by irritation. "It was just a joke." "Wade, apologize to your nephew," my father mumbled, still not making eye contact. Wade just scoffed. "Oh, come on. Kids bounce back. He's fine." I felt nothing. Not anger, not pity, nothing. The emotional connection had been severed. The cut was clean. "Goodbye," I said to the open air, and holding my son's hand, I walked away. I didn't look back. The cold night air hit us as we stepped out of the club, and for the first time in years I felt like I could breathe. The drive home was silent. Leo fell asleep in his car seat, his tear-stained cheek pressed against the fabric of his thrift store coat. I didn't cry. My hands were steady on the steering wheel. My mind was a machine, calculating, processing, executing. The years of keeping the peace were over. The era of consequences had just begun. When we got home, I carried Leo inside and put him to bed. I tucked him in, kissed his forehead, and whispered, "I love you more than anything. I'm so proud of you." He mumbled something in his sleep and snuggled deeper under the covers. I walked into my small home office, the one where I managed my finances with meticulous care. I sat down in the soft glow of the monitor and took a deep breath. I felt a profound sense of peace. I wasn't losing a family. I was losing a burden. A cancerous growth I had mistaken for a limb. I opened my web browser. I typed navient.com. My login details were saved. I clicked. The page loaded, showing the familiar dashboard. Ashley M. Hamilton. Loan balance, $25,600. That's what was left of the original $67,000. $25,000 I was still planning to pay for a woman who had just smiled while my son was humiliated. My thumb moved slowly across the screen of my phone as I pulled up the banking app. It was second nature. The motions were automatic. I logged in, navigated to the bill pay section, and found the recurring payment to Navient, $1,150, scheduled for the first of every month. I looked at the history. 36 perfect payments, a $41,000 monument to my own foolishness. I tapped on the payment. The options appeared: edit, skip, delete. My finger hovered over the delete button. There was no hesitation, no second thoughts, just a calm, cold certainty. I thought of Leo's face. I thought of my mother's laugh. I thought of Wade's smug, cruel smile. I pressed the button. A confirmation box appeared. "Are you sure you want to delete this recurring payment in all future instances?" I tapped confirm. The screen refreshed. The payment was gone. Next, I went back to the Navient website. I navigated to my profile settings. Authorized payers. My name was listed there, granting me access to make payments. Beside my name was a small, unassuming link. Remove. I clicked it. Another confirmation. This action is permanent and cannot be undone. Good. I whispered to the empty room. I clicked confirm. The soft, unmistakable click of the mouse was the loudest sound in the house. It was the sound of a closing door, the sound of a cage opening, the sound of freedom. I had just placed a $25,000 bomb into the middle of my brother's carefully constructed fantasy world, and I had done it without raising my voice. The cut was clean. The first 3 weeks were silent. Gloriously, peacefully silent. I blocked my mother's and my father's numbers immediately after the party. I knew the guilt trips and manipulations would start, and I had no interest in being their audience. I left Wade's number unblocked. I wanted to be there to receive the first wave of panic. I knew it was coming. The loan payment was due on the 1st of November. I had deleted my payment on October 15th. On November 5th, my phone buzzed. It was a text from a number I didn't recognize. Ashley. "Hey, Helen, weird question. Did your payment to Navient go through? I got an email saying my account is past due. I'm sure it's just a system glitch." I looked at the message for a long moment. I typed a reply. No glitch. I'm no longer making payments on that loan. I hit send. Her reply was almost instantaneous. What? Why? Did something happen? I didn't answer. I didn't owe her an explanation. Her choices were her own. My choices were now my own. 2 hours later, my phone rang. It was Wade. I let it go to voicemail. The message he left was a rambling, confused mess. 10 minutes later, he called again. I answered, putting the phone on speaker and setting it on the counter as I made Leo's lunch for the next day. "What the hell did you do?" he yelled, his voice cracking with panic. "Hello, Wade," I said calmly. "Don't, hello, Wade, me. Ashley is freaking out. She just got off the phone with Navient. They said the authorized payer removed themselves and the payment for this month was never made. Her account is in default. This is going to destroy her credit. The Hamiltons are going to find out. Yes, I said. That all sounds accurate. There was a stunned silence on the other end. What do you mean, that sounds accurate? Fix it. Call them back and fix it. No. That single word, delivered without anger or emotion, seemed to short-circuit his brain. No? What do you mean, no? Helen, you promised. You said you would handle it. I did handle it, I replied, placing a sandwich into Leo's lunchbox. For 36 months. I am no longer handling it. It is Ashley's loan. She can handle it now. Or you can. You're her fiancé. You believe in giving your family the best, remember? The reference to his own cruel words hit him. I heard him gasp. This is about that stupid coat, isn't it? You're going to ruin my life over a joke? A freaking joke? Your choices, I said, my voice as cold and flat as a frozen lake. Not mine. You made a choice to humiliate my son in front of a crowd to impress your future in-laws. You showed me exactly who you are, and I believe you. Now you get to live with the consequences of that choice. Goodbye, Wade. I hung up before he could respond. Then I blocked his number. The ensuing firestorm was predictable. A barrage of texts and calls from my parents using my aunt's phone, emails to my work address, a friend request on social media from my mother, who had never shown any interest in my online life before. I ignored it all. I set up a filter on my email to send anything from their names directly to a folder I labeled Archive. I would not read them, but I would keep them. Receipts. A week later, there was a knock on my door. It was my parents. I saw them through the peephole, my mother's face tight with fury, my father looking haggard and defeated. I didn't open the door. Helen, I know you're in there. Open this door. My mother shrieked, her voice muffled. You are being childish and cruel. You are destroying your brother's future. I stayed silent. I sat on my sofa, sipping a cup of tea, and listened as her pleas turned to threats, then to pathetic, wheedling sobs. It was a performance I had seen 1,000 times. This time, I was not in the audience. After 20 minutes, they left. I wasn't losing a family. I was watching a toxic codependency implode under the weight of its own dysfunction. I was merely an observer. The engagement, of course, did not survive. Ashley's parents, the Hamiltons, were furious. Not about the joke, I'm sure, but about the financial deception. The default notice on the loan was a red flag they couldn't ignore. It revealed Wade for what he was, a fraud, propped up by a sister he openly disdained. They saw that the leased BMW and the fancy apartment weren't signs of success, but of deep, reckless debt. 6 weeks after the party, Ashley gave the $5,000 ring back. The wedding was off. The slow rot began. Wade, without my subsidies and without the promise of the Hamilton family money, collapsed. He couldn't afford his apartment, so he had to break his lease and move back in with my parents. The BMW was repossessed. He lost his job at the high-end gym because his lifestyle architect image was shattered. The last I heard, through a cousin who still spoke to me, he was working night shifts at a 24-hour fitness center, drowning in the debt I was no longer servicing. My parents were forced into a harsh reality. Their golden child was a failure, and their personal ATM had closed its account permanently. They had to sell the family home they'd put a second mortgage on for Wade's travels and move into a small rental townhouse. The regret, I imagine, was heavier than any debt. I never reached out. I never checked the archive folder in my email. There was no need. The silence was my answer. One afternoon, about 6 months later, I received a letter. It was from Ashley. I almost threw it away, but curiosity got the better of me. It was a single page, written in neat cursive. She didn't apologize for her own behavior, not really. She wrote that she was sorry for how things turned out and that the situation had opened her eyes to Wade's true character. She was now working 2 nursing jobs to aggressively pay down her loans. The last line read, "You were right to protect your son. I hope one day I'm as good a mother as you are." I folded the letter and put it away. It wasn't an apology, but it was an acknowledgement. A small, solitary note of validation in the quiet aftermath. My life, and Leo's, became peaceful. The constant, low-grade anxiety that had been my companion for decades was gone. The phone didn't ring with demands. My bank account wasn't being drained by someone else's irresponsibility. It was just quiet. We spent our weekends at the park, not at tense family dinners. We went on a small vacation to the beach, paid for with the money that would have gone to Ashley's loan for the next 2 years. We built a new life, a smaller, stronger, and infinitely more honest one. One evening, Leo and I were looking through a photo album. He pointed to a picture from that awful engagement party taken before the incident. He was standing between my mother and father, a forced smile on his face. He looked up at me, his eyes clear and perceptive. "We don't see Grandma and Grandpa anymore," he said. It wasn't an accusation. It was just an observation. "No, we don't," I said softly. "Or Uncle Wade." "That's right." He was quiet for a moment, tracing the outline of my father's face with his little finger. "Is it because they weren't nice to me?" I felt a lump form in my throat, but my voice was steady when I answered. "Yes, honey, it is. It's my job to make sure you are always safe and happy and respected. And they couldn't do that. So we have our own family now. Just you and me. The best family." He leaned his head against my shoulder. "I like our family," he whispered. I wrapped my arm around him, pulling him close. "Me too, buddy, me too." Blood doesn't guarantee loyalty. It doesn't guarantee respect or kindness. It is simply a biological fact. True family is built, not born. It's built on a foundation of mutual support, of shared values, of the fierce, unwavering commitment to protect one another's hearts. Loyalty earns its place at the table. You are the architect of your life, and you have the right to demolish any part of it that is structurally unsound. Some doors must close, not for revenge, but for peace. They must be locked and bolted so that new, better ones that lead to sunlit rooms filled with genuine laughter, can finally open. I never regretted a single second. The peace was worth every penny.